Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of High Explosive Media. So today we're going to be going through automotive light painting. You may have seen a little video I did before, just a little sneak peek of what's to come. In today's vlog we're going to be going from start to finish, explaining all the techniques that I use with the light painting, the equipment that I use, composition tips, environmental tips, a whole range of things. Now when I first started out doing light painting, it was actually a very basic application that I had. I had a Canon 600D at the time, a very flimsy JB Hi-Fi $30 tripod, and I had a lead lenser torch which I put grease paper over the top of it just to help diffuse the light a little bit, and that's what I ended up really first started doing. What I have now, I've actually upgraded camera. Now you don't need to have the most flashiest camera out there, just something that you can really slow down the shutter speeds with, or even have it on the bulb setting. I use a Canon 80D. I also have a LED light panel with a softbox to diffuse the light, and I still use the torch, but that's just to pinpoint my focusing point, but I'll go through that a little bit later. So you don't have to have the most expensive Gucci equipment out there, whatever, you know, just the basics is really what you need to start out with, and then once you develop your technique and you get better, then you start honing in as to what exactly you need to achieve that photo. There's 3 points to remember: camera settings, composition, and environmental factors. Now your camera settings are key in achieving achieving what you want to do with this light painting shot. Now the camera settings, generally what I use, they're around 10 to 15 seconds, depends on which part of the car that I'm actually lighting up. So the front bumper won't take me 15 seconds, so I'll probably use only about 10. Side of the car, I generally find 15 seconds is good. My f-stop doesn't really normally go any higher than say 10, so I keep it around 7.1 on the f-stop. And the ISO is kept to 100, maximum 250. 250 I generally use for the brake light flood, just to get a bit more of that brake light flooding. Also another thing too with the camera settings, now with the lens that I use, it's got an auto and manual focus. Once I've got everything set up in position and I'm happy where the camera is, I've adjusted all the settings to the correct shutter speed, f-stop, ISO and all that sort of stuff. I use that lead lenser torch that I mentioned before, and I point that at the portion of the car that is closest to me. So if I'm doing a rear 3/4 shot, like in this instance, I've got it locked in and focused on the rear 3/4, the part of the car that is closest to me. Once I've done that and the camera's gone, yep, sweet, I'm in focus, lock it off to manual focus. It's important that you do that, because every time you go to hit the shutter and you're in a dark environment, your camera's going to go, I don't know what to focus on, and it won't focus, and you'll just come out with blurred image after blurred image. Right, so that's one thing that's very important, that you lock onto the subject and then put the lens into manual focusing, and obviously don't touch the settings after that. Composition, now this is really important. Composition dictates whether your photo is going to be a failure or if it's going to be anywhere half decent. So obviously you want to pick and choose your battles in this regard. You don't want to have the car set up next to a dumpster. You don't want to have the car set up where there's a light pole shooting through the roof. Big no-no. Now I personally hate photos of cars on grass. Okay, unless you're photographing a four-wheel drive that's hurtling through the mud or something like that, it's all dependent. It's all dependent on what you're shooting. But generally, if you're shooting some low, sleek sports car or an exotic or something like that, please don't take it on the grass. No, look, do what you want, but generally, a rule of thumb is you really shouldn't take photos of cars on grass. It doesn't look very good. All right, you want to pick a location that is, not only is it scenic, but it doesn't overpower the car. You don't want to have distracting things in the background. Okay, so it's just something to keep in mind, even for post-editing as well. Now, environmental factors. Now, things you got to consider is like things like wind, excessive light bleed, street lights, not just sticking out from behind the car like I mentioned earlier, but you don't want a street lamp inhibiting the light that you want to put on the car, because it can, when you're adjusting the white balance, you don't want it to change the color in which what you're applying to the car to what the street light is doing to the car. Traffic, both vehicles and people, okay, that's another environmental factor you need to look out for. So obviously you don't want to have people walking through between the camera and the subject, because that's just annoying, because you're going to get this weird ghosting as they go through, or even cars driving by, you know, their headlights lighting up the subject and obscuring what you're trying to do. Alright, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to show you the bare minimum light passes that I do. I do a few little more here and there, but I will go through those and let you know what they are and describe how I get about them. But these I find are like the basic bare minimum shots that you should use to build the photo. Okay, so the first exposure I generally go for is an exposure called the rim light. Now the rim light is an exposure that you walk on the other side of the subject and away from the camera, holding the light towards the camera to show the outline of the car itself. It helps build the shape of the car. And as you can see, it's following the roof line nicely, all the way down to the pillar and down across the bonnet and the front wheel arch. So that's an exposure I tend to use first off. The next exposure is called the high pass. So again, walking on the other side of the car with the light facing down towards the car. I hold it out on a boom, on a monopod. You can see it's catching the windows space and the bone line down the middle of the car and the front wheel arch again. That one I sometimes have to take a few exposures to get right. Luckily on that night I actually managed to get the shot in the first take per se. That one is crucial. The high pass is crucial because that shows or reinforces the shape of the car, and it is like a building block for the final image. So the next exposure I use is the mid pass. So standing in between the subject and the camera, you're holding it just above the door line, walking from the back of the car to the front of the car. Right, that helps get the nice side profile. It also helps light up the wheels. Even got that TMS sticker as well in the mix. Generally, I stand maybe a couple of meters away from the car itself. The light's probably within a foot of the car as well. And also, just so you know, all these exposures are around 10 to 15 seconds each. Now the wheels exposure, the wheels is important. So again, holding the light facing down towards the ground, that highlighted the TMS sticker pretty well. You can capture the spokes, the brakes of the wheels, and it highlights the edge of the rim. Sometimes holding the light as such helps just fill in all those gaps as well when capturing the wheels. Now the fill light, which is what this exposure is, the fill light just sort of helps create some sort of ground shadow, fills in all those little dead spaces as well. It also helps to make it just a sort of a blank sort of background area. And with this one, this is a two-parter of the ground shadow. Normally I do one, but since there's two different light sources, the street lights that you can see, I try to match their position just to enhance that shadow for where the car is, because you only generally just want to have one shadow around the car. So again, here I'm going to the other street, or the street light, the other building light, trying to mimic that and enforce that shadow as well. Just makes the whole thing seem a bit more natural in a way. Also doing the headlights and the brakes. Now the headlights and the brakes, there's multiple ways you can go about this. So what I just generally did in this was just to display having the headlights and brake lights on. But what I normally do, so with the headlights, if I was doing a front three quarter, I would get one exposure where I'd have the light in front of the car, just trying to enhance, so I bring the light up and down sort of like in this sort of motion, just to shape the headlight, so you don't have this big gaudy sort of flash across the headlight. You have this nice crisp image of a headlight. I usually use that as a base, and then when I do the headlight exposures, I do a very quick exposure, so generally like about 1 second, sometimes even less than that, just to get the headlight shape and the light but it's not overpowering to a point where it's just a big bright light. Headlights are a bright light, but you want to see these little details. Then I'll sort of do probably a full exposure that just generally slowing down the exposure just to have those photos there. Big rule of thumb when it comes to automotive light painting: take as many exposures as you want. It is always better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Now with the brake lights, the same method is applied there. I have one exposure where it's very quick just to create that the tail light exposure itself, the shape of the tail light, so it's not overbearing. And then I use that quick exposure for the brake lights, and then I have a longer exposure for the brake lights when I sometimes up to 250 ISO just to get that brake light flooding on the floor. It creates a really nice effect. Now after you have all those exposures, this is what it looks like when all those exposures are combined. Now obviously you can see a lot's going on here. There's streaks in the background. You can see a bit of that brake light flood down the bottom left hand corner there. You can also see my feet tracking through the image. Now that's because there was a bit of light bleed on me. I generally wear dark clothing to mask myself as much as I can. Think of it as camouflage, if you will. The reason why I don't really appear much in these images is because the light's not reflecting on me. And that's because that's not the point of it. You want it to be all on the car. So after all this, in the post-editing, it's just the matter of which how you layer the images, how you stack them, and you omit the big white streaks and that sort of stuff. I will have a time-lapse video of the edit of this video, which I'll upload at a later stage, but we're just really going on the stages of the light painting, setting it up, actually painting the car before we get into any sort of post-editing. But that's pretty much what it looks like with all the layers combined. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed today's vlog. Please make sure you subscribe. I'll put links to the Instagram and Facebook page for High Explosive Media in the description below. And yeah, again, I'll see you in the next video. Catch you later.